Hey guys, I am so excited to make this video and chat with you about my reading goals in 2025. If you don't know me, my name is Nura and I like to read, write, sing, create content, and other things. Okay, before I talk about my reading goals in 2025, I like to talk a little bit about my reading journey since this channel is about books and reading. As far as I remember, I've always liked to read since I was in elementary school. It's just my reading habit wasn't systematic and I didn't know about the different genres of books that exist. I read everything I could get my hands on. I remember my dad coming back from his work carrying children's magazines. They were in Arabic, and Arabic was the first language that I used when I went to school. And I really had fun reading those magazines. I kept reading them over and over again. I also remember going to a book fair that was held at my dad's workplace when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. It was in the evening, and I remember buying children's books about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's teachings, like befriending your own mother. There was also a children's short story that taught us the importance and the benefits of being patient. And I was really happy about those books. I think I kept them to myself. I don't remember encouraging my brothers to read them as I'm doing now. Now, I sometimes ask them about their current read in an attempt to encourage them to read books. Back when I was 5 or 6 years old, my mother used to read us short stories in Indonesian, and Indonesian was one of the languages that is used in our household. So I pretty much owe my love for reading to my amazing parents. Then I went to college, and that's where my reading habit started to take some kind of form that made sense to me. I've started reading more on a regular basis. And it all started when a friend of mine at work, Allah yadhkurha bil khair, told me about this reading list that was issued by an online Saudi bookstore called Bookchino. It was in 2016, and they're still issuing lists till now, by the way. So the list contained genres or descriptions of books that you should read in that year. For example, they would tell you to read a book from Russian literature, a book that has been sitting on your shelf for ages, or a book that is a translation from Japanese or Chinese. The list was fun. There were, I think, 30 books that we should read, but I only ticked off maybe 10 books because I was also in college that year and my major required me to read a lot of books as well. So, English language and literature was my major, and that's what I started immersing myself in English language when it comes to reading. I started reading books in English most of the time, not only the books that are related to my major, but also self-help books and young adult novels. I enjoyed reading them all in English. In fact, I unhauled a book that was a translation from English to Arabic because I enjoyed reading it more in English and I wasn't satisfied with the Arabic translation. Now, here is what has happened after I graduated from college. I have become hungrier for knowledge when it comes to reading books because we were taught to read literary works critically. And there were critical essays about some of the literary works that we worked with. I've developed this desire to know more about the books I'm reading, especially if they're fiction. Like, I want to know the backstory of the book, the historical and social context of it. Like, reading the book only doesn't satisfy me anymore, and I have to do my research and write an essay about what I'm reading. And it has to be layered because it's more fun when it's like that. Like, the more I invest my energy in a certain book, the more satisfying the reading experience is. So I take a lot of time when I read a book, because in the middle I do some research about what I'm reading, take notes, study the book and the author, and so on. So, although I've set a goal to read 30 books this year, I expect that I'll only be reading 10 to 15 books because of the bookish/nerdy things that I do amidst my reading. And mind you, I'm in a new culture now. I moved to Indonesia in 2020, and I've just begun to read books in Indonesian, so the fun should be triple. Also, I plan to explore other cultures and add a fourth language to my brain to use it for reading and speaking later. That is French. So I'm really excited to learn more about my reading habit, as it also helps me understand myself more. I mean, when you speak 3 languages, sometimes you are prone to cultural schizophrenia, but it's still fun and humbling, and I'm just grateful for this habit of reading that I have. It really means the world to me. Alhamdulillah. Well, this is it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you're reading the subtitle or if you're just listening, thank you for that as well. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.